So what are the specific tools that you need just to get your fur skinned, just to get your catch, once you make a catch, to get it skinned and ready to do whatever the next step is? Skinning's pretty straightforward, but there's some tools that would make life a whole lot easier on you if you had them versus just trying to go at it with a pocket knife. Of course, talking about knives, first thing is you do need a good knife, and I recommend something like this is a Chicago cutlery knife. It's a skinning knife. You can order it from any trapping supply dealers, although I understand that these are no longer being made, so they're kind of, once they run out, you got to find other options. But these are a really good knife. They hold an edge good, they fit your hand nice, and they're like 13 or 15 bucks. I mean, they're fairly cheap. I don't really recommend using a pocket knife for skinning, or at least for doing very much skinning, just because it's not, a folding knife. It's not really made. It's not as convenient. And being honest, a lot of times these folding knives like these are more expensive than this would be. So just having your skinning knife devoted to skinning, I think that makes a lot of sense and is a good thing to go with. You're also going to need, I recommend you have rubber gloves. You can pick these up at Walmart, rubber or latex or vinyl or whatever they are. Fit your hands, but they're just going to protect you. They protect you from any kind of blood-borne pathogens that any of the fur bearers might carry. But they also just make cleanup a whole lot easier. Once you get done skinning, rip those gloves off and your hands are clean. I still wash them, but it's not like you get done skinning and your hands are all bloody and greasy and fatty. Another side benefit is, it's a thin layer of protection, but it may be just enough to keep you from cutting yourself or making too bad of a cut on yourself if you have to cut through that glove first. So I recommend always, and I always wear rubber gloves whenever I'm dealing with animals, skinning or fleshing or anything like that, especially where blood's around. It'd be a big help to have something to hang your animals with, some type of gambrel. If it's just a gambrel that you buy, you can buy a bunch of different kinds at the store. Or if it's one that you make out of chain or old snares or something like that, something where you got the animal and he's hung up and his legs are spread, and that just makes life a lot easier when you got that animal hung. Once you start your skinning process, you're gonna need something to strip the tail out with. They make small, a little tail stripper. It's probably 4 inches long. It's got 2 slots in it, and once you get the tail started skinning it, you put the stripper in place, squeeze it together, hold it between your fingers, and strip the tail off. And the tail stripper, what that means is you're trying to get the bone out of the tail without having to cut the tail all the way down. A pair of pliers works just as well like that. It's a little bit more durable. Some of the ones that they sell are plastic, but they make some nicer ones. But you can do the same thing. You just put the tail in between the pliers like so. Put your hand around the pliers so that the tail is coming out kind of between your fingers. So you got fingers on each side of the tail, and then you just put pressure on the tail as well as on the fur, and that, if you've got it skinned enough, that bone in that tail should pop right out. So it's a lot easier. These pliers are pretty cheap, so I just usually keep a few extra pairs of pliers around. That's what I use for tail strippers. Once you get the tail stripped, you're going to need to make sure it's split all the way out so that it can dry properly. You can do that either with a knife, or they make these tail splitters just like this. It's just kind of like a letter opener or something. You just zip it right out. A zipper is what it's called, a tail zipper. They're pretty cheap, but you can go either way on that. Another thing that I like to have is a big set of limb loppers or pruning loppers, whatever you want to call them. I like the kind that are curved, and what I use this for is cutting the front legs off the animal. Or the front feet at least. It makes skinning a lot easier. And if you've got the kind, they have the anvil kind where it's just flat. But if you've got the kind that's got this hook in it, then the foot or the leg fits in there nicely, and it'll kind of hold it in place while you're cutting. And of course, really, probably one of the more important things is you're dealing with a knife. If you're skinning very much, or you're skinning stuff like beavers and otters that may tend to dull your blade quicker, you got to have something to sharpen your knife with. So when I'm skinning, I like to have one of these just handheld diamond sharpeners, real close by, handy, that I can skin just touch it up real quick with, touch my blade up in the middle of skinning. I'd also recommend having a couple of knives. Usually what I like to do is have one knife that I'll use, try to keep real sharp for my skinning, and then once I get down to the head, you know, where you're dealing a lot more with bone, I'll have another knife that I keep sharp, but you know, I'm not as worried about it. I don't try to keep it as sharp, and that way, you know, when I'm cutting right up against the bone and all, it's not a big deal. But having a handheld sharpener handy to touch that blade up as you go is very important. And then you need some kind of system to keep your knives sharp, you know, all the time. You know, if you get a break or at the end of the season or before season starts, you need to touch them up. You need to get them back in good working order. You know, whether you use a whetstone or something like that. I've started using the last few years one of these. It's called a Warthog knife sharpener, but it's got the wet rock on the angle blades here, and so it's kind of dummy proof. And that you just take your knife and slide it right in the middle here, and it keeps the same angle all the time. Like I say, it's kind of dummy proof. You run that knife through there several times, it's going to reset the angle on that blade, and it's going to keep that blade good and sharp. The only other thing that I forgot to mention is you need to hang your animal. You know, even with your gambler, you're going to need to hang it somehow. So if you've got your skinning area rigged up, that's great. If you can get a little handheld crank winch, or what's really handy is you know, an electric winch, which you can pick them up at some of the discount tool places. I got one for 99 bucks, which is pretty darn cheap for a winch. You don't have to have a super huge one, because it's not like you're picking up or dragging trucks out of the mud or anything. So 99 bucks, I got that winch, and it makes life a lot easier when you're dealing with beavers and stuff like that. You don't have to try to hold them up and get them on your gambrel. You can put them in your gambrel on the ground, lower that winch down, and then hit the button, raise it on up. You can adjust the heights. So that's something I'd recommend if you got you a skinning area rigged up and trying to look for something that would make life a little bit more convenient. Take a look at some of the electric winches at some of the discount tool places, and I think that's a purchase is well worthwhile. So for a checklist of all this stuff, just go to coyotetrappingschool.com/skinning, and you'll find a checklist with clickable links so that you got all this stuff covered.